Zara steps onto the school compound, her presence commanding immediate attention. The soft shuffle of feet and the sudden hush of whispers followed her like a shadow. Eyes darted in her direction, curiosity flickering behind every gaze. "There's the one with the eye patch," a voice sneered, followed by a round of snickers. Zara, however, held her head high, walking steadily toward her class. Her eye patch had always been a topic of gossip, but today, something felt different. The whispers seemed louder, sharper, as if the whole school was waiting for her to prove herself. Then, in the center of the yard, the school bully made his move. Chidi, a towering figure with a sneer permanently plastered across his face, picked on a smaller boy. Kwame, no bigger than a reed, was on the ground, clutching his stomach as Chidi loomed over him. The crowd around them laughed, a cruel chorus of voices cheering the spectacle on. But Zara did not flinch. Her eyes narrowed. Something stirred within her. This was her moment. Without a second thought, she charged toward the scene, her movements swift and calculated, almost as if the world slowed down around her. She sidestepped Chidi's outstretched hand, grabbed Kwame by the arm, and pulled him to his feet in one smooth motion. "Get up, Kwame! Don't let him win!" she barked, her voice sharp as a whip. Kwame hesitated for only a second before his legs found strength. He scrambled to his feet and took off, guided by Zara's firm grip. The crowd's laughter faltered, giving way to stunned silence. Chidi, caught off guard, stared after them, his mouth open in disbelief. Zara stood her ground, not a hint of fear on her face. With a quiet resolve, she looked Chidi in the eye. "Not today, Chidi," she said, her voice cold and unyielding. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. The silence hung in the air as Zara strode back to her place, her actions leaving behind a storm of whispers. "Did you see that?" one student asked, wide-eyed. "How did she do that with only one eye?" Zara didn't look back. She didn't need to. The message was clear. She wasn't afraid. The school bell rang, cutting through the tension like a sharp knife. Students scattered to their classes, but Zara's walk was interrupted. The principal's office awaited her. Inside the principal's office, Mr. Okoro sat behind his desk, his face hard and unreadable. He motioned for Zara to sit, his eyes fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Zara," he began, his tone serious, "we need to talk about this eye patch of yours." Zara sat across from him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her gaze never wavered. The questions were familiar, but today she wasn't going to answer them in the way anyone expected. "I'm not here to explain myself," she replied, her voice low but firm. There was a calmness to her that seemed to unsettle the principal, as though she knew something he didn't. Mr. Okoro leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "Why wear it then? Why keep it a secret?" Zara's eyes flickered for a moment, as if contemplating how much to reveal. She could feel the weight of the question, pressing in on her, like a stone on her chest. Her words came slowly but surely. "If only they knew why I wear this eye patch, maybe then they'd stop asking." The words hung in the air like a riddle. The principal opened his mouth to speak, but Zara stood before he could respond. "I'm not here for questions," she said, turning on her heel. Her voice was cold but filled with a quiet challenge. "You'll find out soon enough." Without another word, she walked out of the office, leaving Mr. Okoro staring after her, the puzzle of her past gnawing at him. Her cryptic challenge echoed in his mind, unanswered and unresolved. The mystery of her eye patch was only deepening. Zara moved through the crowded hallways of the school, the sound of hushed whispers and quick glances following her every step. Her eye patch, ever the source of curiosity, drew attention like a magnet. Some students stared in silence, their eyes filled with confusion or pity, while others whispered behind their hands, trying to make sense of the mystery that Zara carried with her. But Zara, though aware of their gazes, did not flinch. She walked with quiet confidence, her posture straight, her steps purposeful. Her eyes, though hidden beneath the patch, told a different story. A story of strength, of someone who had weathered storms, both within and beyond. A story most did not understand. She passed Amin, her closest friend, who was waiting by the classroom door. His eyes softened when he saw her, the quiet concern in his gaze contrasting with the noise around them. "You're stronger than anyone gives you credit for," he said as they fell into step beside each other. Zara didn't look at him, but the corners of her lips twitched upward in a faint, sad smile. She knew he meant it, but there was a truth he didn't fully understand. "Maybe," she murmured, but her voice was quiet, as if she herself wasn't quite sure what the word even meant anymore. Their footsteps echoed in the hallway as they reached the classroom, and just as they entered, the laughter of their classmates rang out. Sharp and taunting. Zara felt the familiar sting, but she did not react. Chidi, the school's bully, was at it again. "What's with the eye patch, Zara? Trying to be a pirate?" His voice rang out across the room, and a few students snickered. Some laughed outright, eager to join in on the joke. Chidi's eyes sparkled with cruel amusement as he waited for Zara to respond. But Zara stood still, unmoving. Her gaze was sharp, focused, but her silence was even sharper. Chidi's taunt echoed through the room, but Zara remained silent. The power of her stillness was a challenge to him, and though he couldn't understand it, it gnawed at him. For a moment, Chidi's smile faltered. He wasn't used to people ignoring him, to not getting a rise out of his targets. He leaned closer, his voice growing louder. "You think you're too good to talk to us?" He sneered. But again, Zara didn't flinch. She simply turned, her back to him, and walked out of the classroom, leaving the taunts behind like dust in the wind. As she walked down the hallway, she could feel the weight of the eyes on her, the whispers of her classmates trailing behind her like a fog. But Zara didn't care. She didn't need to explain herself to them. Across the room, Mrs. Ada watched quietly. She had seen Zara's silence before, knew the power behind it, and understood there was more to the girl than met the eye. After class, she pulled Zara aside, her eyes searching, thoughtful. "Zara," Mrs. Ada said softly, her voice filled with knowing, "I know there's more to you than meets the eye." Zara met her gaze, and for a brief moment there was a silent exchange between them, a deep, unspoken understanding. Mrs. Ada had lived enough years to recognize strength in its quietest form, but Zara wasn't ready to open up. Not yet. She nodded, her eyes flickering, and then, without a word, turned to leave. That evening, Zara sat at the dinner table with her mother. The room was filled with the quiet clink of cutlery against plates, but the silence between them was thick, unspoken, heavy. Zara's mother, her face drawn and tired, served the food without a word. She had always been like this, distant, as if some part of her was always elsewhere. Zara could feel it in the way her mother's eyes avoided hers, like there was something too painful to face. As Zara pushed the food around on her plate, her thoughts drifted to her father. She hadn't allowed herself to think of him in a long time, but today his memory resurfaced unbidden. She recalled his deep voice, strong and comforting, and his hands, calloused from years of hard work. She remembered him smiling at her, a quiet pride in his eyes. But then the memory turned sharp. His absence, the reason for the patch, the reason for the silence. Her mother never spoke of him, never spoke of the sacrifice he had made, the reason for the eye patch that Zara wore. Zara had never asked. There was something in the air that kept her from doing so, some unspoken rule that bound her to silence, just like the one that kept her mother's lips sealed. As the night wore on, Zara found herself staring at the eye patch in the mirror before bed, her fingers tracing the smooth fabric. The memories came rushing back, fragments of a life that seemed so distant now. She remembered her father, his sacrifice, the battle, and the loss. But she had never told anyone, not even Amin, her closest friend. She wasn't ready, not yet. The next day at school, the tension grew. Zara overheard the whispers as she walked down the hallway. Some students mocked her, thinking the eye patch was just a fashion statement. Others speculated that it was some sort of disability she was hiding. But Zara didn't respond to the rumors. She never did. They couldn't know. They couldn't understand. Amin walked home with her that afternoon, the quiet stretching between them. He had been patient, but the curiosity in his eyes was clear. He had been her friend for years, and yet there was something he didn't know. Something Zara kept from him. "You know," Amin began, his voice hesitant, "you're not like the other kids. There's something about you, something you're not telling me." Zara's heart tightened, but she only offered him a small smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Not yet," she replied softly, avoiding his gaze. She wasn't ready to share that part of her life. Not yet. As the day ended, Zara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of her secret pressing down on her. She knew the truth of why she wore the eye patch, but it was a truth she wasn't ready to share. Not with anyone. Not yet. Chidi's relentless taunts, the one-eyed monster. The schoolyard buzzed with laughter as Chidi, always looking for an audience, led his group of followers toward Zara. "Look at Zara, the one-eyed monster," he shouted, exaggerating his gestures with mocking enthusiasm. The crowd of students quickly gathered around, their eyes fixed on Zara, who stood at the center, the target of their cruel joke. Chidi's taunts were not new, but this time he turned the mocking chant into a battle cry, a cruel song that caught the attention of every student on the playground. One-eyed monster, they repeated, some laughing, some merely staring in silent curiosity. Zara's heart pounded in her chest, the sting of humiliation sharp and familiar, but her face remained stoic. She stood tall, her expression a mask of resolve. Though Zara wanted to shrink away, to escape, she didn't. She simply walked past them, the chants echoing in her ears, louder with every step. Her patience was wearing thin, the silence building an internal storm she struggled to keep in check. The crowd grows, a school-wide spectacle. Chidi's taunt didn't fade with the moment. It spread. Whispers slithered through the school like wildfire. "Did you hear? She's the one-eyed monster," one student murmured. Another added, "She wears that patch like it's some kind of fashion statement." The murmurs of mockery grew into a constant hum, and everywhere Zara went she felt eyes on her. It was as though her entire existence had been reduced to the eye patch, and she couldn't escape its shadow. Zara tried to ignore them. "Let them talk," she told herself, repeating the mantra she had clung to for months. But with each passing day, the words felt more bitter, and her resolve, once unwavering, began to crack. Zara's rising fury. The breaking point. The chants continued, louder, more persistent, and each time Zara heard them, it chipped away at her calm exterior. The whispers followed her like a dark cloud, and every glance seemed to hold judgment. At night, she lay awake, her thoughts tangled in a mix of anger and confusion. "Why won't they leave me alone?" she asked herself, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her blanket. The past few weeks had been torture, and for the first time, the anger she had buried so deep within her rose to the surface. Her heart raced with the fury of someone who had been pushed to the brink. She couldn't take it anymore. It was time to act. A bold challenge. Zara confronts Chidi. Recess came, and with it, Zara's resolve. The moment Chidi sauntered onto the field with his usual smug grin, she walked up to him, her eye patch glinting in the sunlight like a silent challenge. "Chidi," she called out, her voice clear and unwavering. The chatter around them hushed. Students turned their attention to Zara as she continued. "I challenge you to a game of soccer. You think you're tough? Prove it." For a moment, Chidi just stared at her, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. Then his arrogance flared. "You think you can beat me, the star of the school team?" he sneered, his eyes glinting with mockery. "You've got no chance." The crowd watched in tense silence, waiting for something, anything to happen. No one expected Zara to stand her ground, but she did. And just like that, the challenge was set. The game begins, tension in the air. As the game began, the tension in the air was palpable. Zara, though calm on the outside, was full of calculated focus. She knew Chidi's game. His strength was his pride, his arrogance, and she would use that against him. The crowd surrounded the makeshift field, their eyes flickering between the players, eager for drama. Chidi, eager to prove his superiority, charged at Zara, pushing and shoving with every step. But Zara stayed composed, her movements sharp and precise. With every jostle, she danced around him, avoiding his attempts to intimidate her. The crowd gasped as she smoothly outmaneuvered him, her eyes fixed on the ball, her every move deliberate. Zara outwits Chidi, the winning goal. The game reached its peak. Chidi, exhausted and frustrated, pushed harder, trying to throw Zara off balance. But Zara's movements were fluid, graceful even, and with one swift sidestep, she sent the ball soaring past him and into the goal. The crowd erupted in surprise and admiration. Chidi stood frozen, his mouth agape, the weight of defeat settling on his shoulders. Zara, composed and victorious, walked off the field, her head held high. Her eyes burned with a quiet fire, but there was no pride in her step, just a calm certainty that she had proven something not just to Chidi, but to herself. Chidi's stubbornness. But Chidi wasn't done yet. As Zara turned to walk back toward the school, she heard his voice behind her, taunting once again. "Don't get too cocky, Zara," he sneered. "You'll never be one of us." The words stung, but Zara didn't stop. She didn't look back, didn't let his cruelty take root. She had won the game, but she knew the war wasn't over. It wasn't over yet. Amin's growing suspicion, the puzzle pieces start to fit. That afternoon, as Zara and Amin walked home from school, Amin seemed quieter than usual. His mind was working, piecing together bits of the puzzle that he had been too reluctant to solve before. He overheard a conversation between Mrs. Ada and another teacher outside the classroom. "Her father's legacy, it's something she's still trying to escape," Mrs. Ada said, her voice low but clear. Amin's ears perked up. Zara's father? He thought. He had never heard her mention him, but the fragments of conversations he had overheard, the little things he had noticed, now started to make sense. Amin confronts Zara, the push for the truth. Later that evening, as they walked home, Amin's curiosity couldn't be held back. "Zara," he said, his voice serious, "I know there's something you're not telling me. I heard Mrs. Ada mention your father today. What happened? What's the story?" Zara's heart skipped a beat. She froze, caught off guard by his question. For a moment, she could see the earnestness in his eyes, the confusion and concern. But the walls she had built around her emotions went up again, stronger this time. "Please, Zara, you don't have to hide everything from me," Amin urged, his voice softer now. Zara's throat tightened. This was it, the moment she had been avoiding. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. "I can't," she said quietly, her voice steady but cold. "Amin, there are things I can't explain. Not yet." Her eyes were full of unshed tears, pain too deep to put into words. Amin's face fell, his expression one of confusion, frustration, and hurt. But Zara didn't meet his gaze. She simply turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the growing dusk. The shadow of her father, memories of a vanished man. That night, Zara lay awake in her bed, the darkness wrapping around her like a shroud. Memories of her father flooded her mind, his strong hands, the sound of his voice, and the day he wore an eye patch, just like hers. But then he vanished. Where did he go? She wondered. The disappearance had never been explained, and no one had ever talked about it. Was it tied to the eye patch, to the legacy she had inherited? She squeezed her eyes shut, but the questions kept coming. What really happened to him? Zara's internal conflict, to reveal or to hide. The weight of the secret pressed down on her like an anchor. Zara wanted to tell someone, to let the truth free, but the fear of what might happen if she did held her back. She couldn't bear the thought of facing it, of confronting the past. Every day she fought with herself, wondering if revealing the truth would bring freedom or more pain. The mystery surrounding her father and her eye patch grew more intense with each passing day. Would she ever be able to face it? Or would the truth come for her when she least expected it? The battle raged on, both outside and within her, and Zara wondered if she would ever be able to truly escape the shadows of her past. Chidi's rumor, the spread of lies. It began as a whisper, a quiet word in the hallway, but Chidi's malicious intent quickly turned it into something far worse. He wasn't content with merely mocking Zara. He wanted to destroy her. Her dad was a criminal. That's why she wears the eye patch, he whispered to his friends, his voice dripping with cruelty. She's hiding her shame. That's why she looks so messed up. The rumor spread like wildfire. Chidi's words were venomous, infecting the minds of students who had never even spoken to Zara. She's probably dangerous, one of them said. You can't trust people like that. Others nodded, fearful whispers exchanging in classrooms and hallways. The students who had once smiled at Zara now avoided her gaze. Her eye patch was no longer a symbol of courage. It was now a mark of disgrace. Zara could feel the eyes on her wherever she went. Whispers, sidelong glances, the sudden silence when she entered a room. She was no longer Zara, the quiet girl with an eye patch. She was the villain in her own story. The school divides. Zara becomes a villain in their eyes. At lunch, the chatter in the cafeteria felt different. Zara sat by herself, picking at her food, trying to block out the whispers that pierced through the noise of the room. Her dad was a criminal, she overheard one student say. She's just like him, hiding behind that patch. Zara felt her heart tighten as she looked around. Students who had once been her friends turned away, avoiding her eyes. They couldn't even meet her gaze, their fear of what they thought they knew about her overpowering any kindness they might have once shown. The stares were unbearable. She could feel their judgment weighing on her. I can't stay quiet anymore, she thought, clenching her fists under the table. I have to do something. Zara's breaking point. Silence is no longer an option. The whispers followed her into every class, every hallway. Each word felt like a dagger, each glance a confirmation of the lies they believed. By the time the bell rang for the final class of the day, Zara had had enough. She could feel the rage building up inside her. Rage at Chidi for spreading these lies, rage at the students who believed them, but most of all, rage at herself for allowing it to go on for so long. Zara stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'll tell them the truth, she said under her breath, the decision crystal clear in her mind. It's time to end this. It's time to show them who I really am. The announcement, Zara calls for a school assembly. The next day, Zara walked into the principal's office, her head held high despite the weight of her decision. Mrs. Okoro, the principal, looked up in surprise as Zara stepped forward. I want to speak at the next assembly, Zara said, her voice firm. The principal blinked, taken aback. Zara, are you sure about this? She asked, concern in her voice. This could be difficult. Zara nodded, her resolve unwavering. I'm sure. It's time. Mrs. Okoro paused, looking at her carefully. Okay, we'll schedule it. As Zara left the office, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was the moment she had been dreading, but it was also the moment she had been waiting for. She had made the decision, and now there was no turning back. The assembly begins. All eyes on Zara. The gymnasium was packed with students, teachers, and staff, the noise of chattering voices filling the air. Zara stood at the front of the room, her eye patch now feeling heavier than ever. The crowd slowly quieted as the principal called for attention. Chidi sat in the back, his usual smug grin plastered on his face, confident that this would be Zara's downfall. He had no idea what was about to happen. As Zara stepped up to the microphone, her heart raced. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, the pressure mounting with every passing second. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edges of the podium. The room fell silent. All eyes were on Zara. The truth revealed, Zara speaks out. I'm here today to set the record straight, Zara said, her voice strong and steady. My father was not a criminal. He was a hero. She paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing the shock to settle in. Her gaze swept across the room, and she saw the stunned faces of her classmates, many of them now hanging on her every word. He gave his life to protect our village from invaders, Zara continued, her voice growing more confident with each word. During the battle, he lost his eye, and he wore this patch as a symbol of his sacrifice. She raised her chin, her eyes burning with quiet defiance. I wear this patch to honor him and everything he stood for. Zara took a breath, pushing past the rising emotions in her chest. My mother kept this story hidden from me and from all of you because she was afraid of the shame the world might bring. But I am not ashamed. I wear this patch to honor my father's bravery and to remember the life he gave for us. The shocked silence, students listened. As Zara spoke, the room remained still, the only sound her voice cutting through the silence. The students, who had once viewed her with suspicion and fear, now listened intently. They hung on every word, their previous judgments slipping away, replaced by disbelief and curiosity. Chidi's smug expression faltered. He shifted in his seat, unease creeping across his face as the truth unfolded before him. The lies he had spread were crumbling before his eyes. Chidi's smirk fades, the lie unravels. Zara's words continued to pierce through the silence, and with each sentence, Chidi's confidence began to crumble. His usual smirk was nowhere to be seen. Instead, his face grew red with embarrassment as the realization set in, he had been wrong. The truth was unraveling before him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The students, once so quick to believe the rumors, were now questioning everything they had thought they knew about Zara. Chidi could feel the room turning against him. His foundation of lies was slipping away, and in its place, Zara's bravery stood tall. Zara's final words, the end of the lies. Zara took one final breath, her voice steady despite the weight of the truth she had just shared. I will no longer carry the shame of lies. This patch is my honor, my strength, and my father's legacy, she said, her eyes scanning the room. And now, you know the truth. With that, she stepped back from the microphone, the room falling into a heavy silence. Zara held her head high, her heart racing but her spirit unbroken. She had spoken her truth. The crowd's reaction, a shift in perspective. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then slowly, the murmurs began. But they weren't the taunts or whispers she had expected. There was awe, respect, and even guilt in the air. The students who had once mocked her now looked at her with admiration, their expressions filled with wonder. They had underestimated Zara, and now they were forced to confront the reality of what she had endured. The shift in perspective was palpable. Zara's bravery in facing the truth had changed everything. The whispers that had once followed her now turned into words of admiration. Chidi's defeat. The once arrogant bully is speechless. Chidi stood frozen in the back of the room, his face flushed with shame. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. The crowd's reaction had stolen his confidence, and in that moment, he knew he had lost. Zara had exposed the truth, and he could no longer hide behind the lies he had spread. The new Zara, a hero in the eyes of her peers. As the assembly came to a close, Zara walked off the stage, her head held high. The whispers had changed. No longer were they filled with mockery, but with respect. Students who had once avoided her now approached her with words of congratulations. "That was amazing, Zara," one said. "You're a real hero," another added. Zara didn't smile, but there was a quiet pride in her eyes. She had proven herself, not just to her classmates, but to herself. She was no longer the girl with the eye patch. She was the girl who had stood up for the truth, the girl who had fought for her father's legacy. The lasting impact. Zara's legacy of courage. Zara's revelation had a lasting impact on the school. The rumors stopped, and Chidi's taunts became fewer and fewer. The students who had once mocked Zara now thought twice before speaking. They had learned a valuable lesson. Courage, truth, and strength were far more powerful than any rumor. Zara's story became a source of inspiration, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed her bravery. She had shown them what it meant to face your past, to stand up for what was right, and to honor the ones you love. Zara's legacy of courage would live on in the hearts of her peers long after the assembly had ended. A newfound respect. Zara's classmates changed their views. The day after Zara's revelation, the atmosphere at school was noticeably different. Whispers that had once been full of mockery and judgment now carried an undercurrent of admiration. Zara walked through the halls, her head held high, and for the first time in a long while, the students who once avoided her or ridiculed her gave her nods of respect. Even Chidi, who had been the architect of her torment, watched her from across the hallway, his earlier smugness replaced by something quieter, almost apologetic. The change wasn't just because of the truth about her father. It was the courage she displayed in sharing it that truly won their respect. Chidi's quiet apology, the power of Zara's courage. It was during lunch when Chidi approached Zara. He was no longer the arrogant boy who had taunted her for so long. His usual bravado was gone, replaced by a soft, uneasy look. "Zara," he started, the words clumsy and hesitant. I didn't know. I was wrong." His apology wasn't perfect. It was awkward and imperfect, but Zara didn't need anything more. She gave him a silent nod, her eyes locking with his for a moment, conveying everything she needed to say. It was over. She had fought her battle, and now the power had shifted. Chidi had no choice but to acknowledge her strength. Zara's rising confidence, walking with pride. The weeks that followed were a period of profound transformation for Zara. Gone was the girl who hid behind her eye patch and walked with her head down, shying away from the world. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had found her voice. Zara walked through the school with a new air of confidence, her posture upright, her shoulders back, and her gaze unflinching. The eye patch, once a symbol of shame and secrecy, had become her badge of honor. She embraced it fully, no longer hiding from the world, but proudly wearing it as a reminder of the bravery and sacrifice her father had shown. The end of the bullying, Chidi's defeat, and the shift in power. The bullying that Zara had endured for so long finally came to an end. Chidi's taunts, once frequent and vicious, stopped completely. His supporters, the students who had once sided with him, no longer mocked Zara. Instead, they quietly observed, their attitudes shifting. They respected her now. Zara's strength in speaking her truth had stripped away Chidi's power. He was no longer the bully who ruled the halls. The balance of power had shifted, and Zara was no longer the victim. She was the hero. Chidi kept to himself, and the students, who had once followed him blindly, now saw Zara as someone to be admired. Amin's apology, the weight of understanding. One afternoon, Amin found Zara in the school courtyard, sitting alone under a tree. He hesitated before approaching, his expression full of regret. "Zara," he began, his voice quiet. "I'm sorry, I should have trusted you more. I didn't understand." Zara looked up at him, her heart warm despite the weight of the apology. "It's okay, Amin," she said gently. "You didn't know." The distance between them, created by misunderstanding, melted away in that moment. Amin's sincere apology deepened their bond. Zara no longer held any resentment. She understood that he had only acted out of concern. With that, their friendship was restored, stronger than before. Amin promised to never doubt her again, and Zara felt grateful for his support. Zara and Amin's stronger bond, a deeper friendship. From that moment on, Zara and Amin's friendship blossomed. They spent more time together, laughing, sharing stories, and supporting one another in ways they hadn't before. Amin, now fully understanding the pain Zara had carried, and the strength it took for her to share her story, became her most loyal ally. He often asked about her father, and Zara, though still feeling the sting of his loss, began to open up more, sharing memories of the man she had always looked up to. Their connection grew deeper, built on trust and mutual respect. Zara's quiet reflection, embracing her legacy. One evening, on her way home from school, Zara took a detour. She stopped at a small village shrine dedicated to her father's memory. The stone plaque bore his name and a brief inscription about his sacrifice. She stood there for a long moment, her hand resting on the stone, reflecting on everything that had happened. The pain of her father's death had, over time, transformed into a source of pride. She was no longer just the girl who had lost her father. She was his daughter, carrying his legacy forward. The eye patch, once a symbol of her grief and shame, now felt like a part of her, a reminder of her father's courage and sacrifice. Zara knew she was ready to embrace who she was and the story her father had given her. A final symbol of honor, Zara embraces who she is. Back at school, Zara walked the hallways with a quiet sense of pride. Her classmates no longer saw her as the girl with the eye patch. They saw her as Zara, the courageous daughter of a hero. She no longer shied away from conversations, no longer hid her face from the world. She had fully embraced her past, her legacy, and most importantly, herself. The weight of the eye patch no longer felt heavy. It felt like a part of her, a symbol of strength. She had taken control of her story and made it her own. Zara's peace, the eye patch as a badge of honor. With each passing day, Zara felt a growing sense of peace within herself. The judgment from others, which had once made her feel like an outsider, had disappeared. The eye patch, which had once set her apart in painful ways, had become a symbol of the strength and bravery she had inherited from her father. She no longer felt ashamed of her past or her appearance. Instead, Zara walked proudly through the school, her head held high. She had found peace, not just with her past, but with herself. A brighter future. Zara's story inspires others. Zara's journey had a ripple effect on the school. Her story spread beyond the walls of the school, reaching younger students who now looked up to her as a role model. Zara had shown them that it was possible to stand up for yourself, to face your fears, and to embrace who you are, no matter what others might say. She had inspired not only her peers, but also the students who were just beginning their own journeys. Her courage had given them the strength to face their own struggles. Zara realized that her bravery in speaking out had created a brighter future, not just for herself, but for everyone who needed to hear her story. In this resolution, Zara finds peace and empowerment. The bullying stops, her relationships deepen, and she begins to embrace her legacy with pride. Zara's journey of self-acceptance becomes a source of inspiration for everyone around her, and her story becomes a beacon of hope for others who are learning to accept themselves and stand tall in the face of adversity. Zara's quiet reflection, the journey to acceptance. As Zara walked through the school one last time, she couldn't help but notice the subtle change in how everyone saw her. The hallways, once filled with whispers and judgment, now held an air of respect. Her classmates nodded as she passed, some even smiling in acknowledgement. She paused for a moment to take it all in. The girl who had once hidden behind her eye patch, avoiding the world's gaze, now stood tall, no longer the victim, but a young woman proud of who she was. The patch, once a symbol of shame, now represented her strength, resilience, and the courage to face the truth. Zara knew her journey had transformed her in ways she couldn't have imagined. She had embraced herself, flaws and all, and in doing so, had found the respect and peace she had longed for. Owning her truth, the power of vulnerability. Zara couldn't help but think back to the moment when everything changed, the moment she stood before the entire school and shared the truth about her father. She had kept that truth hidden for so long, afraid of how others would view her and the shame she might bring upon herself. But standing there, speaking her story aloud, Zara had found her strength. Owning her truth had not only set her free, but had made her stronger. She realized now that true strength didn't come from hiding or suppressing pain. It came from embracing vulnerability and facing it head-on with courage. In that moment, Zara understood that her pain, her loss, and her scars were not weaknesses but sources of her power. The importance of not judging, lessons learned. As Zara walked the familiar paths of the school, she couldn't help but reflect on the lessons she had learned. The way people had judged her, simply because of the eye patch, seemed so unjust now. She remembered the stares, the whispers, and the cruel assumptions that had once defined her existence. It was easy for others to misunderstand her, to judge her without knowing her story. But now, Zara knew better. She had learned the hard way that judging someone based on appearance or rumors was never the right way to see them. Everyone carried unseen burdens, hidden stories, and battles of their own. Zara had once been misunderstood, but now she understood that no one should be defined by what the world saw on the outside. Zara's final thought, a bold declaration. As Zara stood at the front of the school, the place that had been both a battleground and a place of growth, her heart swelled with pride. She had faced her fears, revealed her truth, and overcome the obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. She had shown the world that the greatest strength wasn't in hiding, but in the courage to stand tall and speak the truth. Sometimes, the truth is hidden in plain sight, but it takes the brave to let it out, Zara said aloud, her voice carrying the weight of everything she had been through. Her journey wasn't just her own. It was for anyone who had ever felt the need to hide, for anyone who had ever feared judgment. It was a message for those who were still finding the courage to reveal their truths. The legacy of bravery, Zara's story lives on. Zara's story didn't end with her victory. It lived on in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed her transformation. Her bravery had inspired her classmates, and even the younger students who had once looked up to her as an enigma now saw her as a role model. Zara had shown them that true strength wasn't about being perfect or flawless. It was about living truthfully, embracing who you were, and standing firm in the face of judgment. Her courage had sparked a ripple effect, changing the way people saw each other and teaching them the importance of empathy and understanding. Zara's legacy would live on in the stories her classmates told, in the way they treated one another, and in the lessons they passed down to the next generation. In this final reflection, Zara's journey of growth, acceptance, and courage is brought full circle. The story ends with a powerful message about the importance of owning one's truth and not judging others based on appearances. Zara's closing line leaves the reader with a lasting lesson. The truth may be hidden, but it takes courage to bring it to light, and in doing so, we change not only ourselves, but the world around us.